This is the 6th part of this manhwa. If you haven't seen the previous chapters, I recommend that you do. After another 3 days, Y announces that he has managed to finish the book and that although there is no concrete explanation of how to activate the magic circle, he has some ideas. Then Y gathers light spirits in his hand and points it at the ground, asking the seal to use its magical power. The seal begins to shine brightly, and the protagonist invites everyone to quickly stand on the circle. They disappear immediately. Later, they realize that they have been teleported to a cavern, the one they were originally looking for. Y warns them to stay on guard just in case. Then he says that he and Swiss will go ahead, and the rest will guard the rear. Apparently, they were beneath the mountain, and it was only a matter of time before they find the divine sword. After walking for a while, Jan says it seems like they are going in circles, but he notices that the ground in one place appears hollow, and there may be something underneath. Then everyone concentrates their energy and attacks the ground. The ground breaks into hundreds of pieces, and they all begin to fall into the void. After the fall, Y wakes up to the voice of a woman telling him not to give up. Upon waking up, he finds all his companions already standing, looking around at the scene where they had ended up. They were in an ancient divine temple. Y is concerned about the group after the fall and asks if everyone is okay. His companions tell him that they are, and no one was injured. Then a voice greets Y, and he asks if it's the barrier. The voice denies it and tells him that it's the one everyone calls the King of the Gods. The King of the Gods greets the group and congratulates them for reaching his abode, emphasizing that along the way, they had managed to pass the trials he set in his divine forest: courage, strength, intellect, and kindness. Y rushes to ask if he will now give them the sacred sword, but the voice tells him that he wants to tell a story first. So he begins. He tells that a long time ago, the divine clans and the monsters lived together in a society. Over time, the monsters revealed themselves as evil and began to multiply rapidly. This led to a battle between the two factions, leaving thousands of individuals dead from the divine clan. But the monsters did not cease their attacks until they annihilated them completely. However, thanks to divine will, the king of the monsters had been defeated and sealed. On the other hand, the one speaking to them, the King of the Gods, had also been badly injured, and for the past 100,000 years, he had not been able to fully recover from his wounds. During this time, the King of the Monsters had been cultivating his power, and due to a small accident, some of it escaped to the surface of the earth, leading to the spread of evil in society. Once the explanation is finished, the voice of the King of the Gods tells the protagonist that their mission now is to locate the King of the Monsters and annihilate him. But he won't let them battle in their current conditions. Instead, he is prepared to lend them a hand. So he pours half of his power into Halo de Mercenarios and tells them that they are now only halfway to becoming what they wanted to be: warriors of ultimate power. Finally, he tells the members to approach one by one to receive a gift that will aid them in battle. Jan, who is the first to approach and is granted the Kratos armor, hoping he becomes a god of battle as it was the most powerful armor on Earth. Swiss Malik is given the Horn of Zeus, which has the property of reviving people. Sean is given the Hammer of Hercules, the most powerful heavy handheld weapon compared to swords. Kim is gifted Thor's shield, which can withstand any type of attack. Dongrai receives the Zephyr Bow, obviously the most powerful weapon in its class, and it is hoped it will be used wisely. Once everyone has received something, Y, who has not been mentioned by the voice until now, steps forward and asks if he won't receive anything. The voice of the King of the Gods says he's too hasty, and then he gives Y what he had for him, the sacred sword of light. He hopes that Y will guide his friends with it and together defeat all the darkness spreading across the world. Everyone feels proud of this as Y extends his hand to receive the sword, which descends in the form of a sphere of light into the palm of his hand. It rests there for just a moment, and then in the blink of an eye, it shoots towards the heart of the light mage. Y didn't understand much of what was happening, but what he did notice was that everyone could wield the weapon that the voice of the King of the Gods had given him, but he didn't physically have the sword to use as he pleased. The voice of the King of the Gods tells him to stop looking for an explanation since the sword lay within him and could only be used once he was sufficiently prepared to wield it. Furthermore, the weapons of the rest of his companions were secondary. Our protagonist asks when he will be strong enough to use the weapon, and the voice replies that he should head to train in the Rift City. This was a place in the west, where humans and demons resided. Here, he could train for 5 years until the Demon King awakens. The voice then explains that the protagonist must be recognized as a Grand Master by the God of Light. Once this happens, the young man can use the weapon that was given to him a while ago. As for the other members of the group, the voice of the King of the Gods says that it will teach them forbidden magic but only when they attain the rank of God. So Y begins to cultivate his power. Some time later, the group returns to the forest where the elves were, and they inform them that everyone was doing well so far thanks to them and their light magic that they had learned from the book. The Elf King invites them to his home, and once inside, he tells them not to worry about the timing and to keep training as much as possible because when the Demon King reappears, they will be better prepared, and even the army of the elves will join that battle as their goal is to maintain peace on Earth. After this explanation, Manhwa thanks the Elf King for their alliance and then asks for some of the wine that had been served at the feast before they left for the barrier. The next day, Halo de Mercenarios continues their journey, but at a certain point, it was time to part ways. Y had to head west to the Rift City to train hard and be recognized by the God of Light to acquire the rank of Grand Master. This training would take him 3 years, and then he could return to the Zeuda Empire to reunite with the group. His older brother and Dong tell him to take care, and the protagonist asks his Swiss companion to take good care of his master, Lai Kiwen. Then their paths separate, and our protagonist sheds tears in secret. Much later, our protagonist returns to his hometown. The first person he encounters is an old friend whom he doesn't recognize due to the passage of time. This friend introduces him to his new girlfriend, named Loyu Hong, a young woman with reddish hair and somewhat attractive. Y introduces himself to her and tells her she can call him by his name with confidence. Afterward, he congratulates his friend on his new girlfriend and says that he can come over to their home sometime for a meal. Now, he bids them farewell as he wants to go home to reunite with his parents. Once there, he shouts from outside the house that he has returned home, and his parents become excited, rushing to open the door to see him. Upon making eye contact with them, all three share smiles and embrace each other warmly, exchanging words of love and compliments. His father tells him how much he has missed him and that both he and his mother have the day off work, so his mother offers to cook his favorite dishes, something the young man cannot refuse as he missed them as much as his parents. While eating together, our protagonist tells his parents about the challenges he has overcome and the good, trustworthy friends he has made. They are delighted to hear about their son's adventures. However, Y knows that his visit is quite brief, and he must leave soon. It's time to continue his journey, and there are still people he needs to talk to. So, he agrees to say goodbye to his parents, who offer the typical parental advice to eat well, stay warm when it's cold, and write to them whenever he can. After this, Y departs. Later, he arrives at the forest where he once began his solo adventure, and to avoid traversing it on foot, he looks for a magical matrix on the ground that he had left to teleport directly to the school. He had used it once after a confrontation with bandits in the same location. Upon finding it, he steps on it and dematerializes, only to materialize directly at the school where he intended to find his teacher. He doesn't need to search for long because as soon as he appears at the school, the door in front of him opens, revealing Leolun Dai, the bearded old man and light magician who had instructed him years ago. Wisely, he tells Y that he had a feeling he would arrive soon and invites him in to catch up on things. Once the protagonist finishes explaining, his teacher is very pleased with everything he has heard. However, he also accepts that, based on everything the young man has learned, he has nothing more to teach him. He asks Y how he wants to continue his life from that point on. The light magician tells him that he would like to return to the Royal Academy of Magic to train for a few more years before facing the Demon King, taking advantage of the best environment. Leolun tells him that he will arrange everything to make that possible. 2 days later, our protagonist is already at the academy he desired. Upon arrival, he introduces himself to everyone, and as the day goes by, he feels the urge to look for his old friend Michael, but he doesn't know where to find him. When the class ends, in one of the hallways, he encounters a beautiful girl with lilac hair who looks strangely familiar to him. He asks her where he can find the level 3 class since he is disoriented. The girl turns around and with a very sad attitude tells him where he should go. Upon finding the classroom he was looking for, he enters and asks if Michael is there. Then a redhead tells him that he is Michael and asks what he can do for him. Y lets him know who he is since the redhead doesn't recognize him, and they embrace in front of the entire class, which feels a bit embarrassed by the scene. Michael tells him there's much to talk about and very little time to do it. While Michael, the fire magician, and his friend Y were sharing a beautiful conversation, the kind that happens when someone hasn't seen another person in a long time, a large group of girls watched from the trees. They were admirers of the redhead, and one of them seemed very concerned and was trying to understand why the young man standing with the guy she liked got along so well with Michael. The concern also revolved around the possibility that Michael might be gay, but that seemed impossible. Then, one of the girls tells her that she shouldn't speak ill of the fire magician because if she does, he will destroy her, and another girl supports her statement. Leaving behind the drama of the girls, let's focus on the conversation between Y and his friend Michael. The light magician tells his friend that he remembers that some time ago, he was pursuing Yu, the girl he liked, but Michael responds that it's all in the past and that he doesn't want to talk about it at the moment. The girl still studies at the academy, and he feels that he will never have a chance with her again. Y is surprised that after so many years, Michael is still in love with her. But the redhead tells him that she treats him like trash, and besides, she already has another boyfriend, which leaves him with no chance. Michael becomes very depressed when talking about these matters and feels that his heart is sadly breaking into pieces. Y then reacts in his defense and tells him that he will give her a lesson. But his friend stops him and tells him that it's time to stop talking about it and changes the subject. Now he tells him that he can feel that he has improved a lot since the last time they saw each other, and to prove it, Y summons a light bag in the palm of his hand without needing to ask the elements of light for it. This leaves Michael perplexed but also very happy. Then Y reveals his current level of magic to Michael, who can't believe it. The protagonist advises his friend that to improve as he did, he must deeply infiltrate the heart of his magical elements and never rush. This advice benefits the fire magician, who confesses that he has been stuck at the same level for several years. To conclude their conversation, Y tells Michael that he hasn't found the sacred sword but boasts healthily about the friends he has made along the way, although he clarifies that he had really wanted to make that journey with him. But neither of them gets depressed. Instead, they both agree that they will have opportunities in the future to do this together. As the conversation was ending, Yu suddenly appears, and Michael is captivated by her beauty, left speechless. Y turns around and can also see her, admitting that she looks much more attractive than the last time he saw her. Her current boyfriend, named Feng Langang, was by her side, and when asked if she was going to introduce him or not, she does. Feng Langang says he is in the 3rd grade of class 3. After this, the protagonist invites his friend to greet the girl, and when he does so with a simple hello, Yu becomes very annoyed, saying that it's not the way to greet after what had happened. She asks the light magician if he wasn't there on her behalf. Y says it wasn't like that but also asks her why she treated him like trash when they had known each other for so long, and he even felt a bit in love with her. Yu leaves the scene with her boyfriend, completely upset by what had happened, and after this, Michael knows very well that this was his last chance to reconcile with the girl of his dreams. Later, the duo of friends entered one of the classes at the academy. While the teacher was explaining a topic, they talked as if nothing was happening around them. This is when Michael tells the protagonist that he has something to tell him that he has hidden from him until now. But when he tells him, he hopes that he won't get angry. Y immediately asks if it has something to do with his family, and the fire magician, very surprised, asks how he knew what he was going to say. But since they didn't keep quiet, the teacher loses his temper and throws water, and a blunt object as punishment. But the young man is completely prepared for this kind of behavior and can defend himself without any problem. After this, he wonders why the teacher had thrown that at him, and the teacher only replies that he would wait for him in his office after class. Then the teacher sends Michael to his class because he knew he didn't belong there. As the redhead retreats, a female voice is heard saying that he deserved the teacher's attack. Our protagonist turns around and meets the girl with lilac hair who had shown him where Michael's classroom was in the morning. Y doesn't exchange words with her and instead throws the object from which he had defended himself a moment ago, hitting the girl in the stomach. She immediately complains and tells the class teacher that the new boy had harmed her, securing herself another visit to the teacher's office right away. After a chat with the protagonist, the young man sits back at his desk and looks annoyed at the girl who had reported him. Then, he writes something on a piece of paper and hands it to her, hoping to gain at least some of the girl's trust. Unfortunately, she crumples the paper into a ball and throws it back, showing no interest whatsoever. At the end of the teacher's lecture, Y leaves the classroom, and the first thing he does is look for Michael. But the girl with lilac hair remains inside, and when the protagonist is out of sight, she approaches to pick up the paper she had crumpled, carefully unfolding it to read what the boy had written. As she finishes, she blushes and her eyes light up, apparently liking what she had read very much. In the afternoon, Michael asks his friend if he still eats as much as he used to. The protagonist replies that yes, he needs to keep his stomach full in order to conjure his light elements. Suddenly, a girl with 2 sky blue pigtails greets him from behind and tells him that she heard he had returned to the academy, so she guessed she could find him in the cafeteria where he would be eating. And she was right. The protagonist greets Shui Zing and tells her that she looks more and more beautiful. Michael gets involved in the conversation, saying that lately she's the most beautiful girl in the whole school, and more guys are after her, enough to form a team. The girl feels extremely embarrassed and asks the redhead to shut up. After this, the protagonist asks if there's anything he can help her with, but she replies that no, she had only approached the place to say hello. Then, she gets up and leaves the boys eating. Once she leaves, Michael informs his friend that since he had defeated Heishui, she had kept him in her heart, and she couldn't get him out of her head either. Y tells him it's time to focus on his studies and not on girls. Now Y brings up the previous topic they hadn't finished talking about. He tells his friend that he still hasn't told him what's going on with his family. Michael changes his expression and pretends to be sad for having hidden this from him. So he grabs him for a hug and drags him to another room, locking themselves in to tell him what had happened since it hadn't been his intention to keep it from him. Once they are locked in and far from any curious ears, Michael confesses that he is the son of Kraus. He is his second son, and he belongs to royalty. Y can't believe what he's hearing and is fascinated and surprised at the same time. Then he asks why he had hidden his true identity at the academy. Then his friend tells him that he was looking for people willing to work with royalty, and he invites the light magician to work with him and the king, and Y accepts without hesitation. As the late afternoon approaches, our protagonist is in class and falls asleep. From behind, the girl with sky blue hair taps him on the back, trying to wake him up. Y doesn't wake up. Then the teacher who had previously taken him to his office throws another blunt object that hits him in the head, causing our protagonist to wake up and react with shouting, asking why they interrupted his sleep. When he opens his eyes, the teacher is in front of him, making him participate in a complex problem he was explaining in class, and as punishment for falling asleep, he will have to explain it to him in front of the class himself. Once at the front, Y says that to make things easy and concise, he explains that all elements react by creating and destroying with their opposite. This means that fire can become water and light could become darkness. All the students in the classroom are perplexed by what they hear, and not everyone understands it. That's why the protagonist decides to give an example by summoning a stream of water and a flame. Then he makes the fire grow to ignite the water, demonstrating that if the opposing force is greater than the other, it can be achieved. Even the teacher himself is surprised by what he had just seen, as he couldn't have explained it in that way. After this, the teacher decides to end the class, and everyone leaves the classroom, except for the girl with lilac hair who watches the protagonist with interest. When they are outside, our light magician asks Michael if he wants to have a friendly battle with him for training. Michael refuses, already knowing the outcome that could happen in that fight. But to help him in his training, he proposes that they compete in a new battle system that was now available at the academy, which gathers the top 10 most powerful students to determine who is the best of all. Y seems interested, especially when he hears that number 2 in that ranking is Harry, the older brother of the girl Michael loves, and number 3 is Muzimo, his lilac-haired classmate, whose name he had just learned a moment ago. As the sun began to set, our protagonist heads to the building where Feng Langang was with his girlfriend and challenges him to a battle. The girl jumps to his defense, asking why he's challenging him if he hasn't offended him. Y sarcastically asks if she's afraid that he will defeat him, causing her to lose interest in him. On the other hand, her boyfriend says that it will be a pleasure to battle with him since it's been a long time since anyone challenged him. Michael tells his friend that the girl must be thinking that he sent him to challenge her boyfriend, and now she will hate him even more. However, Y simply tells him to be quiet and not to cry because it was time for the battle. Feng Langang tells the protagonist that he has heard and witnessed that his magical powers are very powerful, so he won't hold back with his attacks. The light magician tells him that a better battle will be that way and lets him start. Feng Langang raises his right hand, and within seconds, he creates 2 giant tornadoes by his side, ready to sweep his opponent away. Y warns that those hurricane winds are useless against him, but still, his opponent tells his wind elements to attack the boy. Then, when the tornadoes are close enough to Y, he asks his light elements for strength and, using the 9 division light attack, fires a beam at the hurricanes, causing them to explode and disappear from the battlefield. Y asks Feng Langang to use his power to the fullest since the wind wouldn't be effective against him, and he would lose the battle. Now the wind mage obeys what the protagonist says and summons his soul beast, the Sky Hound. Feng Langang warns him that he will attack him with his technique of swallowing the sun, which has been passed down through generations in his family, and that Y might be his first fatal victim. the Wind Maid's girlfriend and Michael react in surprise, but Y, on the other hand, remains patient and invokes the Light of Destruction, an attack that combines elements of light, rivers, warmth, straightness, and smoothness. This forms a laser that is fired from the palm of his hand and pierces the opponent's Sky Hound, completely disintegrating it. However, what our protagonist couldn't control was the use of his magical power, so this attack hits Feng Langang directly, leaving him unconscious and bleeding on the ground. After winning the battle, Y strides over to his rival's body to check that he is okay. After the battle, Michael's impossible love rushes to her boyfriend's body and scolds both wizards who had challenged him, telling them they were not good people at all for doing that. Y knew well that if he hadn't used that move, the Hound would have ended up with him instead. The protagonist faints on the spot, and while Michael holds him, trying to wake him up, Heishui appears and uses her water magic to heal the Light Magician's wounds. In a matter of seconds, the latter gets up, very surprised by what this girl had done for him. Once Y regains his composure, Heishui explains that she has healed his wounds with water but that his magical power will not be restored for a moment. She also asks them to apologize to her sister, who, thanks to the fit of anger she had left the scene very angry with the two of them. The next day, we can see the protagonist with his friend Michael. Both are lying down in an inn, resting. Y asks his friend if he noticed any ill intentions on Feng Langan's face the day before when he summoned his ancestors from the sky and used the swallowing the sun attack. He's worried because he was afraid that the Wind Mage might have had bad intentions. The conversation doesn't lead anywhere, and the protagonist leaves the inn straight to class. Upon arriving at the classroom, he apologizes to his teacher for being late to class, and the teacher asks him to please not let it happen again. When he reaches his desk, he finds a folded sheet of paper in 4 parts, and upon opening it, he finds Zemo's words. The girl congratulates him on his battle the previous day, but asks him not to bother her again in the future. This excites the protagonist. Later, in the cafeteria, the Light Magician meets the one who had healed him, Heishui. She asks how his wounds are, and he replies that he's fine. Then, he asks about Feng Langang. The girl doesn't respond with clear words but warns him that this boy's family could come to seek revenge on him at any time. Although the protagonist says that would be unfair because their duel was conducted fairly, Heishui has something more to tell the duo of friends. In a low voice, she warns them that a civil war may soon break out. Y is disappointed to hear this because he knows that the 3 powers of the kingdom are starting to gather their forces to fight against evil, and a civil war at this time could set back everything that has been going well. To conclude the conversation, Heishui implores our protagonist to speak to his family to help them in this war. But Y refuses because he doesn't believe he can muster the power to face his sister. Then the girl leaves the meeting alone. After chatting for a while, the protagonist, Y, confesses to his friend Michael that during his journey, he had an encounter with the demon sect. These words leave the red-haired Michael trembling with nervousness, and he tells his friend that he should inform the teacher and his father because this is very serious. If the demon clan wants to infiltrate among humans, it's the worst thing that could happen. Y tells him not to get so nervous, but his friend stands up, shouting that it's a reason to be nervous because it means that the demons want to harm humans. The protagonist becomes pensive for a moment and timidly asks if this clan was really so terrible. Between classes, Michael runs into Y in the hallways and tells him that he has seen his father and informed him about the demon clan. Y once again asks how much concern they should have about this situation. Michael ignores him and says that his father had even requested to see Y. He then confesses that he estimates that in a few more months, they will be invaded by the demons who will seek to eliminate the king to seize the royal throne, and after that, the city would become something completely different from what they see today. The Light Magician agrees to go see the king and asks his Fire Magician friend when they can do it. Michael says that in the evening, he will come to pick him up, and they will go together. Y agrees. During the afternoon classes, the protagonist agonizes over the thought that if the king must die, he really shouldn't interfere in this. 3 factions were already divided, and that was enough. Meanwhile, Zemo observed him from her desk at the back and wondered why he had been so pensive today. So, despite her pride, she wrote on a piece of paper, "Why are you so thoughtful today?" and threw it to the protagonist, who received it and immediately opened it. Upon reading it, he thought that her handwriting was horrible and quickly turned to see who had sent him the note, although he already knew the answer. Zemo pretended to be distracted, looking outside through the classroom window. The protagonist believed that the best thing to do now was to respond well to the message since she had taken the initiative, and it was best to follow her lead. Therefore, he wrote something on the paper, but unfortunately, the teacher caught them and scolded both students for being distracted and talking to each other. She smiled, which gave hope to the protagonist. Nightfall arrives, and Michael fulfills what he told Y. He picks him up and takes him to his father's home, which looks like a castle. Y is surprised and says that his house is enormous, so Michael informs him that his father, being the king, couldn't have any other kind of home. Suddenly, the butler of the house approaches and is delighted to see Michael returning. Michael tells him that he has brought the magic scholar with him and asks him to inform his father. The butler obeys and leaves the scene. After this, Y playfully teases him about being called young master and laughs at him. Now, both of them head to the king's study, where he usually receives visitors. Once inside, Michael tells his friend that he can help himself to whatever he likes. They climb a spiral staircase, and once in the room, the protagonist takes a seat while observing the countless books that surround him. His friend goes to fetch his father. While waiting, he picks up a book that catches his attention titled 3,000 Poems. His Highness had arrived. Y stands up, and Michael's father greets him, then tells him that he must be a very successful light mage. Our protagonist bows and greets him, showing respect, but the king tells him that it's not necessary to be so formal since they are in a friendly environment. He also confesses that no one can approach that room without his authorization within a radius of at least 30 meters. Michael's father congratulates him on reaching the rank of scholar, and even though Y says it was pure luck, the king avoids that comment and jokingly asks him to also keep an eye on his son, as he hopes that he will go far on his path. Y responds that his son is working very hard to make progress, and he shouldn't worry because he will meet his expectations. After this, the king asks the protagonist to tell him everything about the demon clan, so they begin to talk, and Y informs him about everything. After the deep conversation, the king says that the kingdom of Ixia was very powerful, and this also added to the problem that he had 3 royal families who wanted to kill him to get rid of him. Y asks if he hasn't tried talking to the factions to unite and then defeat the demon clan, as that should be the priority at this moment rather than fighting among their own kind. The king agrees that this is an idea they should consider, but the reality is that the other families were only seeking power, and not the welfare of humans. Then Michael asks how they can prepare for this war, and his father replies that if they have enough magical power, they can withstand enemy attacks. The protagonist knows that he should help, being a magical scholar, and asks how prepared his kingdom is in terms of magic. Fortunately, he receives a very encouraging response from His Highness. They have 8 magical scholars in their ranks, so together with the protagonist, there would be 9, surpassing the Ixia kingdom, which has only 4. However, this shouldn't be a reason to become complacent because those 4 had been trained by the Earth Knight Academy, which meant they had great power. To make things worse, the #1 global magical scholar of the space element was also among them. Then there was also the vice director of the Earth Knight Academy and the director of the Royal Academy. In other words, the battle would be tough. They didn't have quantity, but they had quality. However, the protagonist decides to talk to his master, Leolun Dai, and convince him to join their cause. During the evening, Y fulfills what he had told King Kraus about visiting his master, Leolun. After a conversation, he convinces him to join the cause. Before leaving, his master tells him that he had hurt one of the members of the Rai family and lightly taps him, conveying a sense of scolding for what he had done. He warns him not to use such powerful magic against them again. Y must understand that as a magical scholar, he can hurt him more easily because he is at a higher level than him. Then his student asks him what would be the best way to handle a situation like that, and Leolun asks him to remember his first encounter with Michael, and the attack he was able to repel, the large fireball that his current friend had thrown at him. That was the way, deflecting the attacks and not hurting the opponent when it was someone with lower magical power than him. Y thanks his master for his words that had once again guided him and promises that he will strengthen that aspect. Leolun then tells him not to leave and spend the night with him as he wanted to share time together. The next day, Muzimo notices that the classmate in front of her is very happy and can't contain her curiosity, so she ends up asking him what is making him so happy. The protagonist says that she seems concerned about him, but she denies it. Then she reminds him that there was an exam today that he had to take, and Y can't believe it because he wasn't prepared. But the girl kindly slides him a sheet with all the topics that will be evaluated next, and the light magician thanks her profusely for what she's doing for him. The teacher arrives for class, and just as the girl had said, he starts an exam to evaluate his students. This turns out not to be a problem for our protagonist, who manages to finish it quickly. In gratitude for what his classmate had done for him, he decides to invite her to eat at a restaurant. In the afternoon, both characters head to an impressive restaurant, a suggestion made by Muzimo. Upon entering, a waiter asks the girl how many people would be dining, and she replies that the table is for 2 people and requests a very quiet spot. Once they are seated at their table, Muzimo orders 1 dish from each of the first 2 pages of the menu and a seaweed jade bamboo. The waiter questions if these 2 young people could really finish all that food, but the girl insists, and he takes their order. Y understands that the girl frequents this place since she knew the dishes. She nods and tells him that she had spent all her money at the school cafeteria, eating as much as she could, confessing that her favorite pastime was eating. A few minutes later, the waiter arrives with 4 different dishes and serves them on the table. Muzimo tells her companion to stop chattering and enjoy the food. Half an hour later, both of them were satisfied, and the plates were completely empty. Y comments that he can't eat anymore, but his companion seems not to listen and calls the waiter, ordering 2 more dishes of minced dragon meat cooked in oil, and 2 ice cream desserts. Y watches her as she enjoys her meal. However, he won't enjoy it as much because once everything is finished, the waiter approaches the table with the bill in hand and hands it to the protagonist, saying that the total for the dinner is 103 diamonds, 4 gold coins, and 8 silver coins. To make matters a bit worse, Muzimo asks if she can take another piece of jade home. Y agrees, but in his mind, he decides he will never invite her to eat again. The next day, after classes had ended, Michael runs desperately to find his friend. He brings the news that his father had received a visit from Master Leolundai, who had decided to join them. Next, they set out in search of the other 3 magical scholars who had so far refused to support the king. Their mission was a success as they managed to convince them to join the battle. Finally, he informs Y that they will all go together tomorrow to negotiate with the 3 remaining families to generate unity and finally combat the demon clan all together. Y quickly says goodbye to his friend Michael and tells him he's going to lie down in his dorm room. When the fire mage asks if something happened, he only gets the response that he's tired. On the other hand, we see Muzimo with her seaweed jade bamboo juice talking to a friend. This friend asks her where she got that juice, and the drink's owner tells her that Y had bought it for her. Then her friend says she feels a bit jealous because Y was good with her, good with magic, and even attractive. Muzimo doesn't respond to this. Meanwhile, Y lies on his bed thinking about the girl with whom he had shared dinner. He wonders why he keeps thinking about her. What was happening to him? Could it be that he was falling in love? The next day, we find ourselves at school again, where the protagonist is lying on his desk. Muzimo appears from behind and asks if they could go eat again. The boy declines the invitation, and the girl gets annoyed, telling him that everyone is the same. This is when the protagonist has an idea. He tells her that if they were to become a couple, they could go eat together every day. Muzimo falls silent and thinks for a moment. Then after the suspense, she responds that yes, but only temporarily as his girlfriend for the purpose of going out to eat together. Y gets up from his seat with a big smile and promises that it will only be temporary. Then, he invites her to eat somewhere else. After a few moments, they arrive at the cafeteria where Heishui is. The girl with 2 blue ponytails approaches Muzimo and asks if they would like to eat together, but upon seeing her with the protagonist, she asks if she knows him. Muzimo tells her yes, but that he's just a classmate. This annoys Y, and he asks her why she answered that way when just that morning, they had agreed to be temporary boyfriend and girlfriend. This news doesn't seem to sit well with the girl with blue hair, who is left with a darkened face, looking down in defeat. Y notices Heishui's attitude and asks if she's feeling okay. He receives a cold yes as a response and tells her that they will leave her to eat alone, and she can go on her way. Once this girl leaves, the protagonist tells his temporary girlfriend that it seemed strange to him that she got sick since they were very powerful magicians and more resistant to diseases. But Muzimo tells him not to be foolish. He should realize that the girl got sad because he mentioned that they are temporary lovers. However, Y tells his companion that he didn't like her, and he has always seen her as just a friend. If it were the other way around, he would have made it clear. Muzimo replies that Heishui was an excellent candidate for him since even her family was excellent. In fact, they were even better than his family, the Zemo family. This surprises Y, but the conversation between the characters wouldn't lead anywhere, so the girl decides to ask her temporary boyfriend to be silent, and then requests that he let her eat. Y agrees and simply watches her while she eats, with the eyes of someone in love. And that's how the 6th part of this manhwa ends. If you have reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you have been one of the few people to make it here. So comment the word light in the comments. Remember to subscribe to not miss any videos. With that said, see you in the next video.